Hello everyone. We just reached 10,000 subscribers, which is insane. There are now almost as many of you as there are living in the town that I live in, which is, it's just completely insane. And yeah, it's just crazy. So to celebrate, today we're going to be doing a different video. We're just going to be speaking unscripted, off the cuff, answering some of your questions to the backdrop of this nice stock footage of my university campus that I took earlier this week while I was working on assignments. So this video we're going to divide into two sections. We're going to do, the first will be personal questions and frequently asked questions, and then we'll do more political questions, more of my opinion later. I am a little bit sick right now. I do have a cold, so apologies if there's any of the voice. I will be, my voice may be going a little bit through this. But anyway, let us begin. So, some personal questions. Where are you from? I am from Ireland. But a lot of people seem to struggle with my accent. I've heard it's quite hard to tell where I'm from because of my accent. I've heard people say that I sound English. People have said that I sound German. People have said that I sound French. Some people think I sound American. But the reason for that is I was born in Qatar, and I grew up there until I was 13, in a sort of international British-run school. So I developed this kind of weird accent from being around so many different ethnic groups and different accents, so I never really developed an Irish accent. I've only been living here for the past, 6 years? Just over 6 years now. I am getting a bit of that Irish twang back, but yeah, I will never get rid of this weird Qatar accent that I have. What/who were your inspirations for making videos? Well, I think most people know that I'm very, very inspired by Kraut. He was the YouTuber that most inspired me to start making my own videos. It was his videos that sort of started coming up in my YouTube feed that made me sort of start thinking more about these kinds of issues like international relations and politics. And they were done in such a unique way, with perspectives that I had never heard before. You know, they were videos that weren't just summaries, which were, you know, the things that I had watched up until that point that were starting to get very boring. You know, they were analyses, they were deep perspectives and real academic work that I found really interesting, so that was the biggest inspiration. I've always sort of been interested in politics and international relations. I was that kid who would memorize every flag in the world. I was able to do the Jetpunk Countries of the World quiz in 10 minutes, getting every country. I'm just obsessed with international relations. I'm obsessed with politics. And discovering Kraut's videos was a big inspiration for me to start on this journey. And also reading, wanting to express the things that I was finding out, reading political books and all that. What are your political affiliations? So I'm not so sure about that. I don't really like labels so much. I don't believe that labels, political labels, are very useful. I believe in human rights. I believe in democracy. I believe in all that jazz. But really, it's a case-by-case basis. I don't see the point in assigning yourself to a group, because no one ever agrees on everything. I like to believe that I believe in what works and what doesn't. I believe that we should just do what works and leave out what doesn't, which, you know, might sound like a cop-out answer, but once you get rid of those political labels, it can be quite freeing to talk about and stand up for what you believe in without thinking, does it align with my beliefs? Do I have to rethink my entire character? So, yeah, that's a bit of a long-winded answer to that question. I'm going to put up on the screen, actually, my political compass. Hopefully I'll remember to do that. What do you study in college/university? That's a question from Patreon from my good mate Lorenzo. I study politics and international relations at University College Dublin. It's an amazing course. I love it so much. Everyone is so nice. All the professors are so just incredible. It's one of the best politics departments in the world. I just love it. At Buggle6118 asks, what's your favorite word? Doesn't have to be limited to English, or something that uses Latin letters. That's quite... Yeah, I thought this was quite a cool question, actually. So I'm learning Russian at the moment, and I really love the word отлично, which means great. And I just think it sounds like what it's meant to sound like. Yeah, I just love saying отлично. I also love velosiped, which just means bicycle. I don't know, it just sounds funny. It sounds nice. It's fun to say. I also speak a bit of German. I like the word zusammen. It's just fun to say, innit? Naturwissenschaften, that's fun to say. English is a bit harder because you don't really get that sort of objective view of liking words. That's a sentence that makes no sense. But, yeah, English is a bit harder. A lot of people hate the word moisture, I heard. So I'm going to put that as my favorite word. Favorite national flag from @FruitSmacks. Favorite national flag? I can tell you my least favorite is Zambia. I hate the Zambian flag. Nothing against the nation of Zambia. Well, maybe something against it. It is a homophobic government and homophobic society over there. But that flag, as someone who is red-green colorblind, the combination of the orange and the green, like, it literally hurts my eyes. Favorite national flag? Don't know why Namibia comes up in my head. I just really love the combination of colors. It looks very symmetrical. South Africa is very nice. Those are the ones I like. Flags with loads of colors, loads of stark colors. And flags with red and black are a massive plus. I love those. So like Malawi, Antigua, Barbuda. Love those flags. J.H. Rafferty asks, demands, give me back my children. No. You're not seeing them ever again. At Patlov says, hi, brackets with Riz. Hey, winky face. So now we're going to move on to some of the more opinionated questions. So, actually a few people asked this question, but it was kind of summed up by @handlesAreDumb420 very well. That's also a very cool name. Your enemy of my enemy video is superb and my favorite. I frequently return to watch it due to how informative, well presented, and well thought out it is. Thank you very much. I really love that video as well. That was really fun to make. Do you plan on making a second part to it or something similar? Do you also believe that the enemy of your enemy can never be your friend? Are there any cases where the enemy of my enemy has been my friend? I don't plan on making a second part to it. I think it was fairly well surmised in that video. But I do really want to do something more artistic like that again. Something more where I have to engage my creative side rather than my academic side, because it just really was, it's just a lot of fun to make, and I just love being creative like that. I love telling stories. That's one of the main reasons I started this channel, and I'd love to do something similar to it in the future. Do I believe that the enemy of my enemy can ever be my friend? Yes and no. It really depends on violence, I think. I think in that video, the examples given, you know, the Nazis, the Taliban, the radical Islamists in Iran, these are all people who are willing to kill for their beliefs. So you should never believe that they are your friend, because at the end of the day, they are willing to use violence against you. But in terms of ideology, it would really depend. If I was, say, being oppressed and I was protesting the government, and some people protesting the government alongside me were, say, right-wing, but believed in democracy, then sure, they can be my friend in that instance. We're gonna disagree politically, but, you know, we're not gonna hate each other. We're not gonna kill each other. I think at the end of the day, if you are using that rhetoric of the enemy of my enemy is my friend, then at the end of the day, the side that's most willing to use violence will win. As you can see in Iran, in Afghanistan, in Nazi Germany, it was the side that was most willing to use violence that won in the end. So you just cannot align yourselves with people that use violence for political gain. Are there any cases where the enemy of my enemy has been my friend? Well, I think the biggest one that I can think of was allying with the Soviet Union in World War II to defeat Hitler. But then again, that didn't really work out in the end because the Cold War began and things got violent again. So I don't think it's ever really worked out well, and any times it's worked in the short term, it leads to more problems in the long term. At Starship1 asks, do you ever feel nervous or in danger for covering certain topics such as exposing China or Rwanda, especially considering the lengths governments go in order to cover up these things? Anyway, keep up the great videos. Thank you, Starship1. Do I ever feel nervous or in danger? I did at the beginning, when I made my Chinese propaganda video. I got a lot of comments telling me I was a CIA mole and that they were gonna find me and kill me. And when you're a YouTuber who gets like a few hundred views per video, that is quite scary. You do think you are in danger. But I've become kind of used to it. Well, you never really get used to people telling you that you're gonna die, but I don't really get worried anymore. I know that Xi Jinping and Paul Kagame and whoever else have bigger fish to fry than me. You know, little boy from Ireland making videos in his bedroom. So I don't really get nervous anymore. If anything, it shows me that I'm saying the right thing. At Fish Out of Water 7743 asks, is there any particular country that you consider to be your favorite / most fascinating in terms of history, culture, etc.? I am obsessed with Russia. I think that it's a country that's in Europe, so it looks sort of familiar, but once you start digging deeper, you realize how alien it really is, and I think that's just so fascinating. I'm learning Russian at the moment. I started teaching myself in quarantine, and I've picked it up in college. I started going to some classes, and I love the Russian language, and its history is just fascinating. It's just dictatorship to dictatorship, and it's the biggest country on earth, a country with 100+ million people, yet it functions like the mafia, which is just insane. It's fascinating. It's depressing, but it is. Sorry about the talk. It is fascinating. At JDLA Canberra 9363, I think I said that right. Apologies if I didn't. Asks, do you always expect some form of response from people who would defend dictators / authoritarians mentioned in some of your videos? With certain dictators it is expected. Gaddafi is a big one. There's a huge culture online who love Gaddafi, and it is so toxic. It is really toxic, and they don't read books. China, of course, there's always going to be the 5-cent army will come after you. Russia, sometimes, not so much anymore because they are being banned and obviously sanctions. They can't, they can't access YouTube on many occasions. But I do always expect some form of response from them. But there have been some weird ones that I've gotten responses from, like Siad Barre. There was a comment saying he was a great dictator in the last video. Said that Somalia was the most prosperous it ever was under him. One on Mugabe, Robert Mugabe, which is just bizarre, because these are people that I would think have absolutely no redeeming qualities. You can kind of understand where people are coming from with China and Russia, and even Libya. Like, these are dictators that did provide, they do provide services for their people, and they have rhetoric that inspires people, but, Robert Mugabe and Siad Barre, it's bizarre. But yeah, I do always expect some form of response. At Roosterman8601 asks, will you plan on doing videos on specific dictators in history, i.e. Ferdinand Marcos, Park Chung-hee, etc.? And do you plan on starting a Discord server? I would like to start a Discord server, but I am a granddad when it comes to Discord. I don't know how to use it, so I would need some help with that. And I think it would be good because we have a nice community here. People are very respectful, people like exchanging ideas, and I think that would be a good idea. Do I plan on doing videos on specific dictators? I do. I would like to dive deeper into countries, like what I did on the Singapore video, but maybe a bit more. I really loved that Singapore video. I think that was a lot of fun to make, and it's fun to dive deep into some of these countries. Korea is a big one I'd like to do. I have an idea for a big video I'd love to do on just the history and politics of the entire Korean peninsula. But at the moment, with college and everything, it's not really feasible. It is researched, it's partly written, but yeah, right now with college and everything going on, it's not feasible. Perhaps some videos in the future, diving more deeper into some dictators, into some countries. At Louise F 2793 asks, what got you interested in the topic of global politics and/or world history? Any helpful tips to find good, reliable information about what's going on in the world? Any thoughts on how Brexit is affecting the UK, both economically and politically? And what do you think the future of Britain is? What got me into global politics, world history, was Kraut's videos. They really inspired me to dive deeper. I have always been interested in it. I've always been interested in politics and in history in general. They were always my favorite. History was always my favorite subject at school. I always tended to do very well in it, and I just enjoy reading about it. Tips on finding good, reliable information. Read books. Don't research everything on the internet. I do use the internet for my research a lot of the time. I read a lot of academic articles, which are just really boring, And anyone who pretends they're interesting is lying. Well, maybe they're not lying. But for me, they're just really boring. But books. I love reading books about history and books about politics. Some authors I'd recommend. Tim Marshall writes very well. Prisoners of Geography was also a big reason why I got into this topic. He writes in a very accessible way. He tells stories that are interesting, that give you more insight. Paul Kenyon is a great author. He has a new book on Romania. And obviously Dictatorland is what inspired the African Tyrant series. Yeah, just read books about world history and politics. And what do I think about Brexit? Well, they fucked themselves, didn't they? Yeah, it's just a big mess. I'm not well versed on, the specifics of the economics, but this seems like the nail in the coffin of the British Empire. This slow decline that's been happening since the end of World War II. And it's really sad to see. Because they could have integrated into Europe. And they could have been a lot better off, but it's this culture of pride that they have over there, unfortunately, that's very embedded, especially within the conservative right wing. And the future of Britain, they'll either have to swallow their pride and rejoin the EU in a few decades' time, or they're gonna fade into a minor power. They'll have to realign with America. They're never gonna be a senior power again. And that's kind of sad. At Los Directos de Trupa 973, I think that's correct, asks, do you think that the Arab world should unify as Gamal Abdel Nasser and Hussein bin Ali intended? Or are the Arabs better off being multiple countries like today? I don't think unification is possible. There are just too many tribal differences, too many religious differences for that to be possible. We've seen that with the United Arab Republic when Egypt and Syria joined. That lasted, 3 years? 6 years? I don't remember. It didn't last very long, and it wasn't really a union, so there were just too many differences. But again, they aren't really doing very well separate anyway. So it's a difficult situation, but I believe that unification needs to be abandoned. It's just not a feasible goal. It's a lovely idea, but unfortunately it's just not possible. Even in Europe, it's not possible. Hopefully it will be possible, but only over the course of like a century. EU's existed for less than a century, and we're only like, a quarter of the way there? It's incredible the work that's been done, but, the Arab world, there's just too much differences. At Rentable Syrup 6896 asks, what do you think the protests in China are going to achieve, if anything? Well, I think since this question was asked, the protests have ended, I'm pretty sure. The government caved in to the COVID demands slightly. Yeah, they were never going to achieve anything, I don't think. That's the thing in China, it's such an intense security apparatus that the party can just never... can't give up. Can't give up power. It's not like Iran or any African dictatorships where protests could feasibly start these wide movements and start revolutions. But the Chinese Communist Party has just built up this security apparatus. It's just it's too strong for any of these to take hold, and they are willing to do anything to protect themselves. They're willing to kill thousands of people if it means staying in power. And unfortunately, it does work. It's worked so far, unfortunately. At James Andrew Cook asks, which channels inspired you to start a YouTube channel? Do you get any help when making your videos? Are you able to make a full-time living on YouTube? Should I pay my taxes? No, you should not pay your taxes. Taxation is theft. Libertarian gang. Libertarian gang. That's a joke. I'm not a libertarian. Please don't unsubscribe, please. Do I get any help when making my videos? No. No, it's all me. I'm the only one who works on my videos. I think the last time I got help was my Singapore video asking Arkin the American to do some voices, which was nice. I got my friends to do some voices in the Italian Years of Lead video. And I got some of my Polish friends to give me insights for the Polish video and to help with pronunciation, because Polish is ridiculous. They use way too many consonants. I love you, Poland. I love Polish people. Just kidding. Are you able to make a full-time living on YouTube? No. I do make money. It's monetized. I have the Patreon, of course. But right now it helps with expenses in college. It's not a livable salary yet. I am hoping that one day it will be, but that's not a priority right now. I am more concerned with making quality content. And monetization is just a plus. At Axelander9999 asks, what's the worst post-World War II Eastern European ruler/dictator in your opinion? Well, the first one that comes to mind is Lukashenko. I think that's just because of he's contemporary, he's still around, and he's bonkers. But another one that comes to mind is Nicolae Ceausescu. Ceausescu? I've only really seen it written. I've never seen it pronounced many times, and every time it's pronounced is a different way. But he was bonkers. He was the craziest, Eastern European, maybe even craziest European dictator, if you exclude, like, Hitler. Just completely nonsensical ideas. Ruined the entire Romanian economy and, inspired the only violent anti-communist revolution post-Cold War. And I'd love to dive more into him. I need to read that book by Paul Kenyon, his new book on Romania, because Romania is a fascinating place. At George Fung 1925 asks, even if this means covering this topic on another occasion, could you provide your take on the ANC Party of South Africa? The ANC was considered a terrorist organization by a number of Western nations during the Cold War, the darling of the international community following the end of apartheid, to a party that has succumbed to the trappings of near-absolute power. Will ordinary citizens ask themselves, besides being the party of Mandela, what progress has the ANC brought South Africa following the end of apartheid? That is a really great question. I'm not entirely well versed on South African politics, but I have been reading the news lately and watching the news. Obviously Cyril Ramaphosa is in a lot of trouble right now, and he's the third South African president in a row to be caught on corruption charges. But I find it really interesting. My professor was actually talking about South Africa once, and he says that it's an exception that it's a democracy, but it essentially is a one-party state, because there are no other parties that can conceivably get power. This image of the ANC being a freedom-fighting party, being the party of Mandela, is just so embedded in South African politics that they can't lose. But I think that is changing now. People are getting fed up with corruption. Third president in a row being brought on corruption charges. And it's a shame that Nelson Mandela's party has become like this. But, that's just, that is what happens. In Ireland, like, we have our political parties that fought for freedom are now just neoliberal shills who ruined the economy. And that's just what happens when you get power. You become mundane, and that romantic image of revolution just fades away, and you become the establishment. So I think the future of the ANC, they're just going to keep losing popularity, and eventually they'll be voted out and replaced, and they'll become just another opposition party rotating power. At Cakes71681 asks, you focus a lot on authoritarian governments. Why do you feel you cover them more than other geopolitical entities or incidents? Well, I think it's simply just because I'm really interested in dictators. I think they're fascinating. It's what I focus a lot in my essays and assignments in universities. I write a lot about them. Yeah, they're just what I really find fascinating. How countries can fall to such tyranny in the modern age, and how dictatorships now are using a lot of weird, crazy ways to maintain control. I just find it so fascinating. Yeah, and that's the short of that answer. At George Fung 1925, back again, asks, will democracy take root in Iraq, or will a strong man eventually take power? Given the growing disgust with government inaction and corruption, the legacy of the US invasion, sectarian division, ISIS, the Kurds seeking greater autonomy, Iran trying to extend their influence in the country, with so many issues confronting them, will the people be tempted to abandon the liberal democratic model and either allow a strong man to take power or follow the Singapore model? Well, I don't see the Singapore model panning out in Iraq. And I don't see the democratic model panning out in Iraq. It's like the institutions are there in Iraq. They're there for a functioning democracy to happen, but just their position, their history, it's impossible. Their culture, they don't have that democratic culture. They've got Saudi Arabia to the east, Saudi Arabia to the southwest, they got Iran to the east, Syria to the west, Turkey to the north, American influence, Iranian influence. Their democracy, it just won't work. At least not now. Hopefully it will, but it looks like it is backsliding. We had the issues with the protests that they occupied the parliament, wasn't it? The Iranian-backed opposition. And that guy, I've forgotten what his name, the Shia cleric, who seems to be a massive figure, seems to be someone who could become an authoritarian strongman, who could build another dictatorship, unfortunately. And yeah, Iraq is it is on the pendulum. It could either swing towards democracy or swing back to another brutal dictatorship. And I hope it's the former. At SepBros917 asks, what's the worst African dictatorship in your opinion? Well, from the ones I've covered, the two that come to mind are Messias's regime in Equatorial Guinea, and of course Idi Amin in Uganda, just people who are arbitrarily violent for no reason. People who... just the most unimaginable torture of humans you could imagine. It really makes you think, like, how can people treat each other this way? Like, Rwanda is up there, just because they've been able to co-opt this sort of Western support, and they're able to justify and legitimize their regime with the whole technocracy. But yeah, those are the ones that come to mind for me. At Nathan9523 asks, can you do videos about the socialists in Central/South America and the US involvement in it? I've seen a lot of people suggest this actually. I think it would be a good idea. I would like to do a sort of Latin tyrants type video where we do like an anthology of Central and South American leaders. You do like Augusto Pinochet? I've been talking for so long, my voice and my brain is fried. We could do like the military dictatorship in Brazil, in Argentina. Of course, the Venezuelan government now under Chavez and Maduro. Yeah, I would like to do it, but of course these videos take a lot of work, and I think I'll start focusing on more like 20-25 minute videos just until college is over. I've only got a year and a half left of college, so after that hopefully we can start going back to some more longer form videos. At Yosh8758 asks, are there any dictators you hold favorable views towards? Any dictators I hold favorable views towards? I mean, at the end of the day, I don't like dictators, but I do recognize that there are some that seem to be benevolent in some way. I really, really disagree with the way Lee Kuan Yew handled the press and freedom of speech and opposition in Singapore, but I do recognize that he turned Singapore into pretty much a superpower with institutions that seem to be functional and no corruption and prosperity for pretty much everyone. But then my professor actually brought this up a few weeks ago. He asked us to name an autocracy with good institutions. And of course Singapore was mentioned. But then he said that we can't really count Singapore because Singapore hasn't been tested yet. Their institutions haven't been tested. So they've only had 2 prime ministers. One was Lee Kuan Yew. The one now is his son. So we need to sort of wait and see in Singapore if they get a prime minister who is incompetent, will the institutions still function? If they get a prime minister who's corrupt, who is power hungry, will the institutions still function? So yeah, I just thought that was very interesting. I can't think of any other dictators I'd hold favorable views towards. Because throughout history they've just always reneged on their promises, they've always turned into tyrants, they've always gotten rid of democracy, obviously, they're dictators, like. But Lee Kuan Yew, I am 50-50 on him. At Maraxus Raphael, I hope I said that right, asks, do you get much flack for the truthness of it all? I know you mentioned some criticism for China apologists, but what about the African dictators or other videos? Yeah, I do. I do get a lot of flack. I got a lot of flack for talking about Gaddafi, Mugabe, Idi Amin, obviously China. Because, yeah, there are just so many people who are duped by this, by propaganda. As Garfield says, you are not immune to propaganda. We are all susceptible. And we just need to tell the truth more. And if we tell the truth more, then we become more resilient to lies. That's a very cheesy line, but it's true. Yeah, I do get a lot of flack. I get a lot of flack. But I'm used to it now. I take it on the chin. I prefer more constructive criticism. I love when people comment criticism in the videos that is respectful and corrects what I say and, yeah, gives me more room to think. I've fixed the audio things now in my videos. I got a lot of flack in the African Tyrants Part 1 because of the Mary Hopkins segment. You just couldn't hear what I was saying. I don't know how I missed that. But yeah, that's not really what you asked, but yeah, I do get a lot of truth. I get a lot of flack. And finally, at ACNJ Enjoyer asks, Libya has one of the fastest growing economies on the planet, with a GDP growth of at least 6.9%. Do you think with this factor, the government can use it to bring Libya out of the dark? I think Libya is heading in the right direction. They've signed the ceasefire, has been in effect for 2 years now. I think I made a mistake in... I think it was my Dictator nostalgia video. I said that Libya was still in civil war. I did not know that they weren't. I didn't know that that had ended, which is great. But yeah, they seem to be fixing their problems. The divisions are being healed. And democracy is taking hold. And I think that in a few decades' time, if they play their cards right, that Libya can be a functioning state. And it can be very prosperous. It was prosperous under Gaddafi. It just didn't have democracy, and people were being tortured all the time. And people weren't happy. But it could be prosperous with the oil, with the GDP growth. And yeah, it's just really nice to see. It's really nice to see. Right. Those are all the questions I got written down here. If I didn't get to your question, I either missed it, sorry about that, or I just wasn't well versed enough to answer it. But yeah, we got a lot of questions, a lot more than I thought I would. I've never talked for this long off the cuff. My voice is kind of sore. And I'm gonna drink a lemsip now. Anyway, if you liked this video, if you're new here, consider subscribing, liking. Check out my other videos. We do a lot of this sort of talk. Special thanks to the beautiful people over on Patreon who keep supporting this. And special thanks to, of course, my #1 huge guy, Joshua Roll. On screen you can see the beautiful patrons, and if you want your name up there, you can click the link in the description and join. Support the channel. Yeah, and that's about it. Like and subscribe. Consider supporting on Patreon, and I will see you in the next video. Take care.